today we focus, or we'll start with education. Education, of course, we know key to so many things. Now, with the reports that we get time and again, where Nigeria happens to account for about 10.5 million of the little over 66 million out-of-school children, and the Nigerian universities not making the top 400 as at last check, and then all of those challenges. We've got different issues on summits here and there about education. So we're focusing on that and how do we revamp that sector. Dr. Austin Tam-George joins us now. He's the Executive Director, Institute of Communication and Corporate Studies in Lagos. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Well, back again talking about this. I know the last time I talked about skill acquisition.
Yes.
Now, it's not just the qualifications that we get, but now, certainly, we'll move beyond emphasizing on just those paper qualifications.
Yes.
We need to do more, do we?
Yes, certainly we need to do more. The government has a responsibility to invest massively in education. We don't seem to get that kind of commitment to turn things around yet. And I think that in an election year such as this, you would expect that politicians would raise education as one of the major issues to be discussed in the campaigns, but you don't get that sense of commitment. Last year, in June last year, UNESCO released a report that 5 million children in Nigeria that should be in school are out of school. This is a massive number, higher than the populations of several countries. You don't get that sense of commitment, not just only from government, but from all stakeholders. And I think that the way to go in order to demonstrate the kind of commitment we should have is probably to hold an education summit. We are all stakeholders, parents, educationists, development scholars, government agencies, donor agencies come together to chart a new course to revamp education in Nigeria.
Do you think, first of all, that we should scrutinize that figure? 10.5 million children.
Yeah.
Should we raise eyebrows as to where UNESCO or how UNESCO came about that kind of figure?
UNESCO has no interest in scandalizing Nigeria. They conduct studies from time to time to know the ratio of students that are in school. Mm-hmm. Now, in Nigeria, the problem is not just the amount of children that are out of school. Even those who are in the universities, who are in different stratas of educational system, do not get the kind of quality of education they should have. You find people who go, to school to sit for the school SAT exam, for instance, and they barely know how to read and write. People who are trained as lawyers do not get trainings in logical thinking and expressive skills. So the tendency is that a lot of our students do not get even the kind of quality of education that they should have. So it's not, we have a duality of issues here, not just the number of kids that are out of school, but the quality of education that those who are in school tend to get. And I think that the government alone can't tackle this. All stakeholders in the sector must come together, but they must have a sense of urgency because we're just in the second decade of the 21st century and we can't afford to toy with education. We need to demonstrate a very serious commitment to revamping the sector.
Is it possible to begin to revamp the education sector without creating, first of all, a target? I mean, where's the nation headed to? Can we revamp the sector without looking at where the nation is going to?
That's an interesting question. Typically, countries have what they call national policies of education. In Nigeria, we have a national policy education that sets out the specific framework, the kind of specific value systems and targets that educational systems should meet. But you see, as you know, having a framework is one thing, having it implemented at different levels of the educational system is another thing. You tend to find, even in primary and secondary schools, especially in the private, private schools, where they tell you in advance when you want to enroll your kids that they run American curriculum here, they operate British curriculum here. Sometimes they even tell you they operate both British, American, and Nigerian curriculum. And you wonder whether that kind of curriculum concoction is something that is in the first place recognized by law, and what kind of system will this be? Sometimes you ask, do they also run Nigeria curriculum in the US? You don't get that sense that people know exactly what they are doing. I suspect that is because our regulatory framework has collapsed. And then we do not have this sense of urgency in terms of what happens in the educational sector. So framework is good. Having a national policy on education is a fantastic thing. But how do we make sure that all stakeholders, both in the public and private educational sectors, are actually doing the right thing? We need a very strong regulatory oversight. We need to make sure that all stakeholders, including government agencies, donor agencies, parents, all stakeholders must be involved. And I think that one way to go would be to convene an education summit where we'll brainstorm on how we can make sure that we develop a knowledge economy away from the extractive economy we seem to be running since 1958.
You know, part of the question which Margaret talked about, I mean, this UNESCO report 10 years ago, Nigeria paraded almost the same figure. Now, 10 years after, a similar figure. And then there are laws in this country that says, look, parents must send their kids to school, offenders will be dealt with. And today we don't know if there's anyone who has ever been taken to court for that purpose alone. So two things come up here: having the policy and implementing the policy.
Exactly the point I made. If we recognize that there is a crisis, I doubt if there are Nigerians that will dispute the fact that we have a crisis in our educational system. I have been in the sector for the past 20 years, and I know and I have seen gradually how systems have been sliding, how standards, from the recruitment of teachers to the design of curriculum to the quality of teaching, the extent of commitment. You know, just in your introduction, you mentioned something about how there has been strikes in all kinds of sectors. And these strikes, you know, do not just happen in the moment of epiphany. They actually happen because of a certain extent of disgruntlement in the system by stakeholders. If you allow it to linger for 7 months, for instance, when strikes happen for as much as 7 months, what it means is that millions of students are potentially out of school. And when they are out of school, it's going to affect the quality of pedagogy, even when they return, because they now want to catch up. And you can't play catch up when you are in an educational system, because it's not just the time, but the quality of education that you get. I think that our politicians need to do more. Because they are the ones who have a constitutional responsibility to set the tone on a sector-by-sector basis. 7 or 8 months down the line to a new election season, you would expect that politicians would raise education and the standards that we have as a subject of debate. But we don't even know who the presidential candidates are. We can't engage anyone. So it's a serious problem, and I think this is something we need to consider across the board.